All right, I'll go next. Minnesota. I have them as, I will say, stairs up exclamation point. I like this team. The first thing I like is they get what I think is a reasonable but really sneaky upgrade at quarterback. Um, Tanner Morgan was good. His numbers were really good. He got hurt, and they brought in this kid. He was actually, I think, really highly recruited. You probably know this better than me, Isaiah. This Ethan Kaliakmanis.
I believe it's Calio McTonis or something like that. Yeah, it's he's got the Greek freak kind of thing going on here.
Well, his nickname is the Greek Rifle, so we're just going to go with that. So the Greek Rifle, he had an apex of 115 in his first 5 or 6 starts as a college football quarterback. 115 is ridiculously good right out of the gate. Here's the thing that's even crazier. He did this against at Penn State, at Nebraska, at home versus Northwestern, at home versus Iowa, at Wisconsin, and versus Syracuse, who had a really good defense too. Those teams had an average defensive apex of 73. So I don't have my 10 key with me, but he's 42 points above what those teams usually gave up. And this is his first 5 games. It's nuts. So not just a quarterback upgrade, but a sneaky big quarterback upgrade. And you know how I know this guy's going to be really good? Just to kind of veer off into one of my favorite topics. DraftKings doesn't have a Heisman future bet on him. That's why I know he's going to be great, because those monkeys don't know what they're doing. Moreover, Wisconsin they retained 147% of their 2022 Ryan. So they lost almost nothing, and they gained the third most in all of FBS through the portal for Ryan. And I think a lot of that, seriously, is the Greek Rifle. I think kids just said, this guy knows how to throw. I want to play for him. The running game was good. The thing that's a little bit of a concern is Kirk Shiraka is now at Rutgers, so we'll see what happens there. I think I don't know. I don't. Do you have any idea what happened there, Isaiah? Since you're in Big Ten territory,
with him leaving, or
yeah, I can't imagine they asked him to leave because their offense is pretty solid.
No. So the thing about, if I recall correctly, he was at Minnesota. He came for Flex first and second season, I think.
Yep.
And then he left and he went to Penn State.
Yep.
And then he got fired there, and he went back to Minnesota. And I'm not sure. He definitely didn't get. He has a connection to Schiano because he was with Rutgers when Schiano was there first.
That's right. And Flick and Schiano are kind of guys too, right?
Yeah. So my guess is that Schiano asked him to come, and he was good with that. It wasn't it's not a get out of here kind of thing, no, because he was good for them, and they were actually much better at offense when he was there.
I was going to say maybe he's one of the millions of people that hates PJ Fleck, but he actually came back to work for him, so that wasn't the case. Under Fleck, the defense has been pretty consistently good. Once he got Joe Rossi in as defensive coordinator, that was just a game changer for the program, I think, as a whole. I think that I'm going to go over here. The total is 7, and the over is actually plus money. The key game here is September 16th at North Carolina. That's a really pivotal game with all the changes they have in terms of their new offensive coordinator and what that means for them. But I like the over here on the Gophers. Isaiah?
Yeah. So I think you look at these PJ Fleck teams, and the first thing you say is, well, they've done it before, right? This is kind of a team that has become, and a program that's kind of become something that we know what we're going to get from them, which is kind of a controversial thing in the Twin Cities because this is historically not a program where you think, 7, 8, 9 wins, that sounds about right. So you've got half of this fan base thinking, well, I remember where we were. And then you've got half of this fan base saying, okay, but he keeps winning 8 to 9 games. Where are we going to go from here? And it's really interesting, by the way, if you for Big Ten people, because the Twin Cities media hates him. They hate him. So I really like their defense. I think they're going to be very good on the defensive end. They were actually 8th in the nation last year in total scoring. And the crazy thing about that is they had no pass rush. None. I mean, they just let you sit there. Um, I think that's crazy to me, especially if you think about like the Big Ten West. Like just to have a defensive line sitting there and not pass rushing is crazy to me. Um, you're in a winnable division. That's a good thing. Um, and the pieces are here. The thing that concerns me for them is the other side of the coin with the Big Ten West. They have continually had problems on the offensive line, and it's still going to be a problem. It's still a work in progress, and I'm with you on the quarterback. I really like his long-term potential. I think this is a really talented kid who can be really good, but and you threw it, by the way, his first start, if I recall correctly, was at Penn State. I believe that was his first game. That's impressive to go in there and play in a night game and make that your first start. He's not afraid of things. He also beat Wisconsin. So, and this, again, PJ Fleck has shown now that he can beat Wisconsin, but this is a program that is not historically very good at beating Wisconsin. So, you've got these pieces here, but I'm a little concerned that this style isn't going to work this year, just overall, with that offensive line. And the other thing, when we've hit it on a couple other teams, is I don't know how sustainable this defense is when you have no pass rush, because I don't look at their team this year and see anything that makes me think it's going to get much better. I don't know if it's a scheme thing. I don't know if it's the players or what it is, but I don't see it getting immediately better. And that concerns me when you have a variety of teams that you're going to face, that, whether it's your Wisconsins and your Iowas that are going to run the ball. And again, now you have questions on the defensive line, or you have, teams like Illinois that can mix it around a little bit more, or you have your Nebraskas and your Purdues that want to throw a little bit more. I feel like there's just so many toss-ups on their schedule that I don't know if I can trust them long-term. And I look at their schedule overall, and when you have you're playing at North Carolina early in the season, that's a real tough ask, even if you are confident in your team. I know North Carolina's kind of been a disappointing team, but I do think they're going to be solid this year. You're opening against Nebraska at home on a Thursday. That's a real interesting way to throw everybody into the fire. But then you look at the overall schedule. They get Michigan and they get Ohio State.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah.
You get Illinois, which, again, I think that's a really intriguing team just for so many of these matchups. You have to go to Iowa, and they haven't beaten Iowa in I don't know how long. And then you got that Wisconsin game again. So, there's a lot of these games where it's like, yeah, I could see them taking the step up and beating Wisconsin again, or, maybe this is the year they finally beat Iowa. But I don't see this as a contending team in the West just because I don't see it with this schedule. You already got 2 losses there with Michigan and Ohio State, so you're asking a lot from the other teams in the West to have 2 losses or more as well.
Sure. Good points. Robert?
Yeah, I mean, Minnesota is, again, I feel like it kind of falls. We talked about Penn State in the Big Ten East. I feel like in some cases, some of the same things apply to Minnesota. Not same quality as Penn State per se, but in terms of divisional quality, I think it's kind of similar, right? Are they going to be good enough to take on the top dogs, right? Well, I mean, it is a very winnable division, but I mean, personally for me, I'm projecting Wisconsin to be up there. So I don't know if they're going to be able to take out Wisconsin. Can they take out like Iowa? Yeah, they definitely can, and maybe a couple other ones. But are they really going to be able to go into Michigan and Ohio State and win? And the thing is, again, that's 2 conference losses, right? How are you going to be able to win the division with those 2 conference losses? And I think Wisconsin, only has to play Ohio State, right? So, I mean, I think you could make an argument for Stairs that maybe this team is going to be better this year. Maybe this team, again, if this kid develops a bit more, has a really good next year, maybe this could be one of the best teams in the country next year. But I got to think at this point, at least, it's probably only minimal improvements. And again, if I'm in the Big Ten West, I'm very scared of that Wisconsin team, and I want to see what they can do. I want to see how good the new quarterback is, but I kind of think their amount of improvement is limited by that schedule.
Very fair, but you're both wrong. I'm kidding. All right, Maryland, Isaiah, you want this one?
Yeah, so I think Maryland's a really interesting team because you look at them in a couple different ways. And again, everybody outside of Michigan and Ohio State in the Big Ten East they become afterthoughts. And I think that's really the case if you're not Penn State, too. And I like Maryland. I think that this is at least going to be a fun team to watch. I do think sometimes that Talia Tagovailoa gets a little bit overhyped on what he's going to bring back, but you can't really deny some of the stuff that he's done. He threw 26 touchdowns in 2021. Last year, he had a bit of a problem with turnovers, but he's still throwing for 3,000 yards in his in his entire time starting. Last season, 18 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. So you've got a guy who obviously has something going here. He's got an arm. He can move around. He can make the explosive plays. The rest of this offense is just absolutely loaded. The two running backs they're returning in Roman Hemby and Antoine Littleton are both really good. So you've got an experienced, capable quarterback. You've got a really good running back duo. You've got their top two pass catchers that are coming back, the wide receiver Joshua Jones and the tight end Corey Dykes. And I really like the tight end piece there. You got some transfers coming in. So it's never the offense with Maryland, though, obviously, that trips them up. It's the other end. It's the defense. So you look at the defense, and it's where can we get better? They need to improve on big plays. They give up too many big plays, and I saw it in their toss-up games last year. The big one that I watched where burn them was the Purdue game. This is a back-and-forth game. It is a game that I personally thought Maryland should have won when I was watching it. But they would look really, really good for the first down and second down, and then they would just let a guy go. And with Purdue's passing attack last year, that's all you needed. They got it done. So I need to see Maryland shore that up. But I think if you make even modest improvements on that defensive side and you can slow down those big plays a little bit, I think this becomes a really intriguing team. So their win total, I think it's at 7.5, depending on where you look. I actually do like it on the over because I think the schedule is really favorable for them. If you look at how they start the season, you've got their annual game against Towson, yes. I don't know. That's a win. You got Charlotte. You've got Virginia. I don't see any issues in any of those three teams.
Nope.
They're all at home also. Nope. Then you get Michigan State. Again, we've talked about them. Yeah. Then you get Indiana.
Uh-huh.
So, is this team – if you're not 5-0 at this point, you've got an issue. Obviously, Then you get Ohio State. That's a tricky one. And then you get the big game, I think, for them is the Illinois game.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got Northwestern. So in the first, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. In the first 8 games, there's only one game I look at it and say, you're not going to win this one. And there's only one game where I think you really have a realistic potential of not winning this one. So, I feel like it's really set up for them to do something. And then if you can get through that slate and do what you're supposed to do, then you have the Nebraska and you finish with Rutgers. So, I feel like it's set up for this team. They just they have to reach out and take it, and that's been Maryland's problem. Can you go and you reach out and you take it?
Man, that schedule is just room service. You just look at it. It's just like, here's a nice steady ramp, and then you get the nice palate cleanse at the end with Rutgers. Man, yeah, that is juicy. I didn't even show their defense is that bad last season. I actually had them as above average, but to your point, it's not like the overall. It's just like timing and just when it goes bad, it goes really bad for them. What's interesting too is they bring in Josh Gaddis as the OC, which I think with the skill that they have on offense is going to work well. It's interesting, he worked with Loxley at Alabama. And then Loxley took this job. Gaddis went to Michigan, and then they argued to the press about who was actually calling the plays at Alabama. So it's interesting that they kissed and made up, and now they're back together again at Maryland. To your point, I think that it kind of seems to me that Loxley's kind of tied down. This is not something to put on your epitaph, but it's no small feat. He's locked down that number 4 spot in the East, which good for him. I think it speaks to what he's done with the program, because it certainly weren't that when he came on board. I kind of have him in the lobby. I don't see, aside from Gaddis, really a huge improvement on either side of the ball. But they should be good. And, I kind of overlooked the schedule. So I think maybe just the schedule just moves them up by maybe one win or so, just by that alone. Robert, what do you got on Maryland?
Yeah, I've got them as stairs up again, slight improvements. This will be Tolia Tungavailoa's very likely last season will probably be an NFL prospect. I did actually really like them last year, but he got injured last year, right, for a bit, if I remember correctly, right? Because
it was kind of off and on, if I remember. I can't remember if he didn't start a game or not, but it was a lingering thing. Yes.
Yeah, because I had him against Michigan, and I think they actually did cover the spread against Michigan last year. But I remember I really liked them against Michigan.
They only lost by a touchdown.
Yeah, I think the spread was like 14, I think, or something like that. But it was I really liked him in that game. I thought they could have potentially won that game, but then he got eventually injured. I think. If there's a time for him to make a case that he's an NFL quarterback, I think this is going to be the season for it. And again, with a relatively easy schedule, there's a pretty clear path for that. Again, though, you're in the Big Ten. You're in the Big Ten East. They're in the East, right? Yeah, so they're going to have to play Michigan and Ohio State. So that's not particularly fun. And again, it's kind of the same feeling as Penn State, right? It's like, okay, we're like one of the top teams, but not one of those top two teams, right? And then that's the problem, right? So stairs up, but again, there's that ceiling there. Again, it's like, okay, we're better, but we're not Ohio State, Michigan level yet.
Yeah. And the one other thing I will say on them is, obviously, I'm not picking them to beat Michigan. I'm not picking them to beat Ohio State, but I think they give me kind of vibes towards what I've seen from some of my Purdue teams, where you've got this explosive offense and, all it takes is that one day where you just can't miss a throw and you can't miss a score, and the other team's defense just isn't there. You never know. So you got some volatility there. Again, I'm not picking them. I'm not saying they're going to beat Ohio State or Michigan, but, you do steal one of those games and you never know what happens.
Yeah, that's a good point. Will they beat every team? No, but can they beat any team on the schedule? Yeah, if things flow right. It's not like they're, hopeless. There's a path, literally in every game that they have. All right, next. I'm going to go with Illinois. I have them as a stairs up team. Third season under Brett Bielema. I actually, when they hired him, I actually believed that he would actually do well here. Just 30 seconds on why, when Barry Alvarez was the AD at Wisconsin, Barry Alvarez was pretty much the coach. So I don't really think he got the full head coaching experience at Wisconsin. Then he goes to Arkansas to work for an absolutely dreadful athletic director, Jeff Long, who doesn't know what he's doing. So, he didn't succeed in his first real head coaching job at a bad spot in Arkansas at a tough program. So I think the jury was out on him. I think people I thought he had a chance. And a lot of people said, yeah, he stunk. So this doesn't surprise me. I didn't think they'd be this good this soon. The big changes to me are Tommy DeVito departs. They replace him with Luke Altmaier, a transfer from Ole Miss, and he was the top 10 or 15 quarterback coming out of high school. And I think that this is by far the most talented quarterback that Lunny and Brett will have at Illinois. If I'm looking, I got some history here. So Brandon Peters, before he came to Illinois, his apex was 71. He moved up to an 83 in his first year, and that was like a whole rebuild year for Illinois. Tommy DeVito, before he came on board when he was at Syracuse, his apex was 81. Last year was at 100. We don't have any kind of history with Altmaier because he was backing up Jackson Dart, but I think that these guys they know how to get a lot out of their talent, Bielema and Lunny. On defense, I had them as the best defense in all of FBS last season. Their defensive apex was basically a 26, which is basically you're making everybody look like Arthur Sitkowski when he was at Rutgers. They lose Ryan Walters to Purdue. Their defensive coordinator is a first-time defensive coordinator. I believe he's a promoted position coach. But here's the thing: Bielema is a former defensive coordinator, and he took them before he came on board. The defense was a negative 9.6 power rating. First season, he took them to 2.9. Side note, I don't know how I missed that on this whole, look at what a head coach does on his side of the ball in the first year. I'm kicking myself that I wasn't expecting Illinois to be so good. So then he brings them up another 10.5 points after that. Please don't take this the wrong way, Isaiah. Walter's defenses at Missouri were nowhere near as good as we saw at Illinois. So I think that really the magic here might be Bielema as much as it was Walters. They actually had 1.7 games of bad luck last season too. Circa has them at 6.5 for the season win total. That just feels like a total pat on the head. Like, yeah, nice job. That was a cute little season you had. Now go back to the lower middle class. And I'm pretty comfortable going over here. I really, they lost some pieces, but I think the infrastructure is there. And most importantly, the head coaching is there. So I really, really like Illinois this season. What about you, Robert?
Yeah, I have them as kind of stairs down a little bit. I think they did lose like a top 5 NFL pick there in Devin Witherspoon to the NFL draft. So I think their defense is going to take a little step back. I mean, it's like kind of like stairs down lobby, right? Because, they do upgrade at quarterback, but with it, again, the power behind this team last year was the defense, right? Okay, upgrading quarterback makes their offense a little better. That's fine. But again, if your defense progresses a little bit, and again, Illinois wasn't. When we talk about regression candidates, Illinois very quickly stands out as like this team that went from like nothing to amazing to now maybe potentially might come back, right? So there are concerns. I think they could. Like, here's the thing, and I'd love to see them sustain a really good defense and love that. But the thing is, you can't make a bet on that right now. I don't think you can make a bet on them sustaining that level of defense from one year to another year.
Yep.
Isaiah?
I am not making a bet on them, and it is not just because I can't legally bet on Illinois teams in the state of Illinois. I think they're a very intriguing team because I'm with you as a person who grew up in Wisconsin and watching the Badger teams. I'm in, as we say, on Bert, and he got a lot of hate that he probably didn't deserve. The one thing that you always saw with Wisconsin was let me hit on my basketball pain here. They would win the games in the regular season, and they would win the games that don't really matter. And then the second that the lights came on, it was just disaster mode. And then he goes to Arkansas, where he never had a chance. That is not his fault. He just never had a chance there. So I don't knock him at all for that. I did like the hire, actually, when they picked him, and because I thought – basically, you're looking at a program that is successful when they can run Wisconsin light. They are not going to get the talent that Wisconsin gets, even if he is a good coach. But if you can run this scheme where you're running the ball and you're controlling the line and you're controlling the tempo of the game, you can be successful at Illinois to at least, a 7-8 win kind of season success. There's a narrative going around him that they lost everything. That's not really true. They lost a lot. I think you're foolish if you think that losing Chase Brown, one of the best running backs in their modern school history, is not going to matter. Even though I like the running backs they bring back, McCray and Love, they're great running backs. I think you're silly if you think that losing Devin Witherspoon is not going to matter again, even though they have a lot of returning talent. So you've got a team with a lot of younger talent that feels like it's ready to step up. But again, you need them all to step up. And if there's a little bit of regression from that defense, that's where you start getting into muddy waters in a division where basically anybody can beat anybody. Now, the other thing you look at with Illinois is their schedule. And their schedule is really favorable. Let me just pull it back up. But this is, if they're going to make a run, this is definitely a schedule to do it. So you've got a very interesting non-conference game at Kansas. That's not a gimme anymore.
Nope.
And then you've got that Penn State game real early in the season. But you look at the rest of this, and it's really workable, right? You're getting You do have to go to Purdue, which is going to be really interesting with this Bielema Walters thing and just how the fan bases are going right now on Twitter. It's interesting. You get Nebraska at home, which is one of your wild card games. You're going to have to go to Maryland, but that's again, what can you exploit with that Maryland defense? You get Wisconsin at home, which I think is a big one. Because they have been one of the few West teams that has been able to knock Wisconsin off in the past couple of years. Now, maybe you're attributing that to Paul Chryst. I don't know. And then you finish off with Indiana and Northwestern as two of your last three games. So this is a workable schedule for them. I am not comfortable jumping on them like some people are saying that this is a 9-win team. I'm not comfortable going that far. I think they're going to make a bowl. I would be absolutely shocked if they don't make a bowl. I'm going to kind of peg them around 7 wins. And if they do a little bit better than that, I wouldn't be surprised. If they do a little bit worse than that, I wouldn't be surprised. But I think Bert's got them on the right track overall.
You guys calling him Bert? That's so mean. So two points. Their defense is going to regress. I think they've definitely got room to regress. They're 4.3 points better rated than Michigan. So, a pretty stiff regression still leaves them in pretty elite company. My cutoff for betting unders is if a defense needs to be 7, and that's a really, really good defense. So, again, I have faith in the coaching there. When you're talking about the schedule, you did not mention Ohio State nor Michigan. So they really drew, they don't get Rutgers, but hey, I'd gladly forego Rutgers if I can skip the top 2 over there. All right, who do we got next? Nebraska, Isaiah.
Yeah, so Nebraska, this is, this Big Ten West, I think this year is full of storylines because you've got so many coaches coming in and you've got so many programs that are trying to kind of look at what their image is. And Nebraska, for the past couple of years has been my biggest source of futures income because I just stuck wins under every year, and it hit every year because they just would not learn with the Scott Frost thing. It was 7 or 8 wins on their win total every single year. And the problem with that is as you kept going on, it started becoming more of a, when are they going to get the talent to win? And it was, wait a minute, they have the talent to win. This guy can't coach. At least he can't coach them. I'm not going to take away with the season he had at UCF. I am going to question a little bit how much of it was him. But, by the end of that thing and that last season where he didn't even make it 5 games in, I mean, you're playing Northwestern, a Northwestern team that was eventually going to go winless on U.S. soil. You're up. You have this game, and you kick the dumbest onside kick maybe in the history of onside kicks. And the second that onside kick failed, I went straight onto my app, and I was in Indiana at the time. I went straight onto my app, and I bet the Northwestern money line live. You just knew it wasn't going to work.
I don't believe you're the only one on this podcast that did that, right? I think somebody else on this pod did that.
Yeah. Well, it was. That was one week. I was watching that game, and I watched that onside kick live, and I'm just like, what is happening? Like, why? Again, he's like, oh, we did it to keep the momentum going. And I'm like, but what?
You had the momentum. You didn't need it. Yeah.
You really needed momentum.
But I really like the rule hire. And the reason I like the rule hire is because, this isn't a guy who's coming off some great season at a G5 school. This is a guy who has winning experience in a battle-tested conference and who has done this before with a really good program. So he's coming in, and it might take some time. I like their offensive coordinator hire bringing in Satterfield. They've got some interesting pieces to work with. Jeff Sims has potential at quarterback. He's got to stay healthy. The big thing with him is he's got to stay healthy because he hasn't done that in his 2 years that he played at Georgia Tech, I believe it was. You've got some depth in the wide receiver core. You've got some pretty good options to throw to. There's a lot of youth on this team. I have them as a stairs up because I think that from the past couple of years, they've just been so down, the one thing that they really just need to see is they need to see that they can win, and especially they need to see that they can win close games. And when you bring in a coach like Matt Rule, I think you're going to see that in some of those games, you made the jokes about how many games Scott Frost lost by one score.
Mm-hmm.
And some people were like, oh, they're just unlucky. But it was dumb penalties, undisciplined plays where they're just, they're killing themselves with unsportsmanlike penalties or ridiculous play calling or that onside kick or whatever you want to go with. And it just screamed coaching themselves into a losing culture.
Yep.
You flip just a couple of those games, and the narrative on Scott Frost changes completely. They they should have beat Michigan one year. They could have beat Ohio State that one. I don't remember if it was last year, if it was the year before. No, I think it was the year before. They could have beat Ohio State, and they lost by, that one was 9 points, I think. I think Rule is going to take some time. Some people, again, are saying Nebraska 9 wins or something on the table. I don't think they're going to be that good. I think there is just a little bit too much youth, and they lost a little bit too much to the transfer portal. But the one thing I'm really confident on is they are not going to make those just unbelievably stupid mistakes. And I think they're going to be a much more competent team. And when you have a competent team under a good coach, it's kind of just a matter of time, at least for me.
I agree. What about you, Robert?
Yeah, I do have Nebraska as stairs up. The team will improve. Matt Rule is a better coach. I will say that there was. I mean, again, I'm a football on 2 days, Saturday and Sunday, so I watch a lot of the NFL, and there was a lot of concerns coaching at Carolina. Now, that being said, though, it is different. It's not the same thing. He was successful in college, and we have seen a lot of coaches go, and Nick Saban is an example of this, going to the NFL, not succeeding, coming back down. So I'm not necessarily maybe the most concerned about that. But I think there is concerns, and that's kind of keeping me a little bit away from saying, like, oh, this is it, guys, Nebraska's back, and Nebraska's found their head coach. I'm a little skeptical. I also question Jeff Sims. I think they could have done better. I think there is a lot of other quarterbacks in the portal that I would much rather have than Jeff Sims. And I question why it was then Jeff Sims, right? Matt Rule wasn't high. I mean, Matt Rule was fired pretty early in the NFL season, right? If they were going to get Matt Rule, they had more than enough time to scout a lot of these guys in the portal. I don't really think there was any particular rush on that. It wasn't like, I mean, was Jeff Sims their target? If Jeff Sims was their target, that's a little concerning. But if not, then that means they got like their last guy, which is also concerning as well. So I don't know. They will improve. Maybe they make a bowl, but I'm shying away from like big Nebraska predictions. I need to see how this is going to go. Right? You need to clean away everything with Scott Frost and see how this progresses. And I could see this going really well. I could see them winning like 8 games, and then next year that we're talking about them to win the Big Ten West, or going to the conference championship game. I could see that, or I could see them being like 6-6 this year, and then whatever happens on quarterback next year. Like I could see this going a couple different ways. I think generally it'll probably improve. Maybe they'll probably make a bowl. I think they'll probably make a bowl this year. Maybe a win or two above that.
Okay.
I think their win total when I got it was 6.5. I did play the under on that. I think a bowl is on the table, but I don't see them getting more than 6 wins. Again, my optimism on them is more, it's just going to be better than what it was. Now, you can't really get much worse for Nebraska than what it was. But I do think it will be refreshing for Nebraska fans at least to watch a team that doesn't just continually shoot itself in the foot.
It would be awesome if they just had a really dumb loss to come out of the gate. Different story. Matt Rule was so good at Temple that he actually may think that Jeff Collins is a good coach when Jeff Collins took that over. So I think long term it's a good hire. You seem more sold on Marcus Satterfield than I. I didn't watch a lot of South Carolina, but I saw that basically every Carolina fan wanted him fired at some point until the last 2 games of last season. So I don't know what that means. I don't know what his background is before Carolina. But we'll see. The thing that really sticks out to me, like I'm not getting up on you. I need to be convinced on Jeff Sims. I can't believe that Casey Thompson lost the job to Jeff Sims. I was thinking about it. It's kind of like there's probably like true crime reenactment TV shows that have done this 1,000 times about, the old guy at a bar gets hit on by some hot young chick, and then he wakes up the next morning and his wallet is gone and all his clothes are gone and he doesn't know how he's going to get home and he can't tell his family. And so he just kind of gets home and never mentions anything. And I kind of wonder if Casey Thompson just didn't say anything to his family, and all of a sudden in May he says, by the way, I'm in Florida now, because he can't tell his family that Jeff Sims beat him out for the job. On defense, I like bringing in Tony White. He was really, really good at Syracuse. I think that's a really good hire. Again, though, it might take some time. I just don't know what to expect for year one. As somebody whose team's going to be in the Big Ten, this is using my idiot's guide to game theory. I'm disappointed that Nebraska made such a good hire. It would have been a lot more fun to go against Scott Frost, but we're not so lucky. So I think that you've got it about right, Isaiah. Bowl team, but barely. I don't think they're going to really do anything to beat themselves.
Yeah, and I know with the Big Ten West, one thing you got to always talk about with these teams and teams with questions, again, you look at the schedule. Where are the 6 wins? Well, I like their non-conference. They get at Colorado. I'm sorry, with all the prime hype, I think Colorado's going to be terrible. So I like them to win that game. You get NIU and Louisiana Tech. You should win both of those games. You get Northwestern. That should be a win. And then so that's 4. The question then becomes, where do you get the other 2? You get Purdue at home. That's probably a game you should win. And if you can get that one, that's 5. Then you get at Michigan State. And that becomes – so you got those 2 kind of games. You also got Maryland at home, so that's an interesting game. So it's I see how they get to 4. I see how they get to 5. Actually, I think the Michigan State game's probably more likely for them to win. Then it's a matter of taking one of those Purdue or the Maryland games, because I don't see them I don't see them winning at Illinois. I don't see them winning at Wisconsin. I don't think they're going to beat Iowa this year. They could. I don't think they're going to. They open at Minnesota too, which is
that's a tough spot.
Again, it's a tough spot for both teams. I cannot stand this Big Ten obsession with opening season games on Thursdays. That's not when college football should be played. I don't like it. I hate that last year they put the Purdue-Penn State game on a Thursday night. I did go. I had to take vacation to go. That game was great.
I enjoyed that game.
So cool.
Yeah.
That game was so much fun. Imagine if that would have been on a Saturday.
Well, it might get lost, though.
It could have, but I don't know. I'm 53.
I think
you're asking a lot.
Yeah, I'm 53 and I'm married, so that sounds like a lot of fun for me on a Thursday night. But different stages of life, we'll just agree to disagree. Fair point, though. All right, next team, Michigan. What can you say? They were just awesome. I had their, obviously reigning Big Ten champs. Then they had an unfortunate end of their season in the playoff. I had their offense actually 3rd nationally. The thing is that people overlooked is that their offense was actually better than their defense last season. In terms of my metrics, I had them 4 points better on offense and defense, which is pretty surprising. JJ McCarthy, I have him as the highest rated returning quarterback in the Big Ten with a 129 apex. Here's the thing that is just absolutely amazing. So the GGAB stat, ground game against Boston College. This is based on the number of rushes you have, how many yards you did better than if Boston College had that many rushes. They finished 2nd in all of FBS, and here's the thing that just scares me. They were only 46 yards behind Air Force. Air Force, who doesn't pass the ball, and they're only 46 yards behind Air Force. That's they were just peak Georgia defense, but on offense. That's just brutal. And I think they retain enough on offense where they should be just as good of a running game next year. And, my gosh, if Blake Corum is healthy all season too, scary. Their defense is just, they're brutal against the pass and the run. They actually have the 3rd highest improvement metric in all of BC or FBS on defense too. Harbaugh is one of my good luck as a skill coaches. I don't know if he can do it for a third season. So I actually have them as a little bit of a stairs down, just because gravity's got to take a pull. If he's been lucky for 2 seasons now, part of that's having good quarterback play. I'm also just really wondering what on earth happened on the TCU game. I'm not going to read too much into it, but do we just toss that? I don't know. Maybe it was just TCU's year. It's weird. 10.5 total is a little high for me because I'm kind of high on Penn State too. And this is a tough division, the best division now in a very good conference. I need a little more wiggle room than that. So a little bit of stairs down, but I'm just amazed by their running game. That stat frightens me. I hope that all those guys graduate by the time USC plays them, because that could get really ugly. What about you, Isaiah?
Yeah, my thinking on the TCU game is, I never throw out a game, but I partially kind of feel like the way I feel with the Ohio State game, where it's everybody wants to look at Michigan because of that. That defense didn't get torched all season until that one game, and I'm really, really thinking that is the exception. The other thing about that game too, TCU got a lot of their production off Michigan turnovers. Michigan would not stop throwing the ball to TCU. And that is not a problem that Michigan had all season. So you take away some of those turnovers, and I don't think you see the same TCU performance. Now, obviously, again, you can't just take it away. You can't retroactively say it. I'm more inclined to think that game was a fluke. It was a big fluke at the biggest stage. That's been something that has bitten Harbaugh until he figured out how to beat Ohio State. Mm-hmm. But you look at this roster, you've got J.J. McCarthy coming back. One of the biggest issues I had always said for Jim Harbaugh when they were losing to Ohio State every year and finding like some other game to blow it, like the Iowa game or whatever, was they didn't have stability at the quarterback position. He kept bringing in these random transfer quarterbacks because he wasn't willing to have a season where they were good, not great, to develop a guy. And so you'd have these random guys coming in. They'd be perfectly serviceable, but you get to the Ohio State game and you get to the game that matters, and that's where it would show because Ohio State would have that guy. Now they got that guy, J.J. McCarthy. He's proven he can do it. He was really good last year. I think he's going to be really good this year. 22 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, and again, most of those picks coming in that meltdown. That's crazy. You talk about Blake Corum, who is incredible. Again, one of those running backs who can take over a game, win it yourself. And then, by the way, they've got Donovan Edwards, who broke out in that Ohio State game because Corum was hurt. Mm-hmm. And Edwards was, driving the stake into the field in Columbus on them. So you've got this loaded run game, which works really well for this Michigan system. You've got really good lines. And you've got somehow they found a way to make their non-conference worse than last year. I don't know how. I don't know how they did it, but somehow they found a way to make it worse than last year.
They had Hawaii last year.
They had Hawaii.
And UConn.
I wanted to make, although UConn was. Look at their non-conference for this year. Just tell me what you think.
Oh, it takes a second to get to.
It.
We gotta call this up now. Okay,
I got it up. So you start with East Carolina.
Boy. Okay,
that's better than their first week last year.
Yeah, it is better than the first week. Then you welcome in UNLV.
Yeah,
and then you finish off with Bowling Green. Oh, and then by the way, for good measure, you finished your September in Ann Arbor with Rutgers.
Yeah. Wow.
You could not ask for an easier 4-0.
Yeah.
I don't think. You can't script it better than that.
No, that's nuts. Jeez.
So my concerns on them, their wide receiver room got a little bit thin. You've only got one major starter that's returning at wide receiver. You've got a little bit you're going to probably have some regression in the secondary with some young players playing in the secondary. And you probably want to see a little bit of a better pass rush coming from the line. But if I'm looking at this team, versus all the other teams, I have the fewest questions and I have the fewest doubts on Michigan, at least on paper. I just think this is a really good roster. I think they have the schedule. I'm with you. Again, I share kind of the same rule on betting 10.5s. I didn't do it. But I will say maybe just interestingly enough, this is not the betting favorite to win the Big Ten, which is very interesting to me.
Yeah.
And you can probably guess where that's going with me hinting on that. But that's where I am with Michigan. I think as long as they can throw away those two playoff games, I'm not gonna skewer them for getting blown out by Georgia. Everybody gets blown out by Georgia, and I'm not going to, I'm not going to ignore the TCU game, but I think they need to throw that away. They should be in Indy, in my personal opinion, and we know what happens when a Big Ten East team gets to Indy. So you're looking at that playoffs. That's got to be the goal again, and you got to get that win.
Yeah.
Robert?
I generally agree with it. I put them as lobby. The thing is, again, it's kind of the same as a lot of these teams. I mean, they're the best, if not the second best team in the Big Ten East. Hard to get better than that. They lose a couple pieces on offense, but they keep the key pieces of JJ McCarthy and Blake Corum. My only concern though is that there's just like I feel like at some point it's just like there'll just be a regression somewhere. Like this team has been really good for 2 years, but JJ McCarthy was not particularly inspiring. Like he was good but not great. But I think to be fair though, that's exactly what John Harbaugh wanted it from. It's John,
Jim.
right? Yeah.
Jim
Sorry,
Harbaugh.
John's the coach for the okay.
John's
for
the
Ravens,
normal one.
The normal one. They're identical twins though, but no. So that's exactly what Jim Harbaugh wanted from him, right? So and I mean that's fine, but at a certain point, I feel like if he regresses a little bit, cause he actually did produce pretty well. Like for all the rushing Michigan did, they did a lot of rushing. He actually he would usually get like 2 passing touchdowns a game or so. So he did actually contribute significantly to now of course they scored like 1 billion points a game. So that eventually some of them are just going to be passing touchdowns. But I worry if people start figuring out how they're winning games, if they figure out a way to shut down McCarthy. I think there's a chance this team could regress. I'm not the high like. Again, the thing is, it feels like a weird thing to say, right? Because I'm like knocking Ohio State. It's like, oh, they got a new quarterback. They're going to have all this new stuff. But this team's exactly the same. But I just feel like everybody's like, oh, they're exactly the same. They're going to perform at exactly the same level. But I think there's a non-zero chance that maybe they get a little complacent. Maybe teams figure them out a little bit. That maybe they could be a little bit worse this year.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. Again, I'm not touching the 10.5 because it's a very real thing. It's very easy now for people to go and be like, oh yeah, Michigan's going to beat Ohio State. Well,
yeah,
I'm not going to go that far and say, oh yeah, it's already done. They get them at home. That's a good thing. And it's the same thing now too. It's so easy to talk about that Ohio State game that you forget how good I think Penn State's going to be. And they have to go to Penn State this time. So, there's a lot of challenges. You look at a team on paper. I think Michigan is it for me. But I think you make a really good point about what happens if there's a little bit of luck regression, if there's a little bit of, I don't want to say stupidity, but, you never know what happens there.
Yeah. Okay. Last team we're going to go into in detail, Purdue, your school, Isaiah. So you lead us on this one.
Yeah. Making all the Purdue fans wait till the end. Smart.
Sorry.
No, I like it. You got the strategy here. I think it's a very interesting spot to be for this program because when Jeff Brom came in, you could not get a worse spot because it wasn't just that the team was destroyed and the program was destroyed. The fan, just caring about the apathy I've seen that I saw around that program when Hazel was there. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I've seen that kind of fan apathy anywhere else. And I know a lot of Indiana football fans, so I've seen fan apathy. So you got this guy coming in, and it was like, okay, what's going to happen? It can't be worse. And he immediately takes them to a bowl game. And then he does it again in the second year. And he had some down years, and then you hit these highs of 2021 and 2022 where you're winning 8 games, 9 games, beating Tennessee in a bowl game, upsetting two top 3 teams in Iowa and Michigan State. And now he's kind of gone. Now, some people are like, oh my God, Jeff Brom's gone. But if you were paying attention and you were reading the T-Vines, you knew it was coming eventually. He wanted to be at Louisville. And the last couple seasons, it was pretty clear where his eyes were. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing. He took the program to Indianapolis. I don't think anybody should be crapping on him. He did everything we asked him to. And now you've got the program in a spot where it's at least stable. It doesn't feel like it's going to fall apart as long as the next guy coming in knows what he's doing. So, does Ryan Walters know what he's doing? Well, he's brand new. We don't really know. Again, as you mentioned, he coached a really good defense. We don't know entirely how much of that was him and how much of that was Bielema. But, I don't think anybody can deny how good that defense was. He comes in, he knows at least most of the teams in the area because of the recruiting he had to do at Illinois. And one thing that I feel that everyone feels really good about him is, and it won't have an impact this season, he is recruiting at a wild rate. I mean, we're seeing multiple 4-stars committing to this program. It's not something you see. Jeff Brom had some really good hits with, like your Rondell Moores and your David Bells and stuff like that. But he did not pull in 4-stars like Ryan Walters is already pulling in. So long term, I think you've got a guy that at least feels like he knows what he's doing. And the fans really like him too. He's a young guy. He's active on social media, which is really cool. He and Bielema have been, I don't know if it's mutual, if they're actually going at each other, but they've been kind of in a Twitter war, which is really entertaining to watch. And there's this rumor, actually, that he showed up in Champaign because Illinois was going after Hudson Carr for quarterback as well. And there's a rumor that he showed up in Champaign personally to pick Hudson Carr up for his Purdue visit, which was right after Illinois. Now, I don't know if that's true, but if it is, I got to give him a little, you know what? Good on you. I like that.
Yeah.
So we look at the roster. Hudson Carr, I think, is a pretty good transfer pickup. He's got, 2 years. He wasn't a starter, but in those 2 years at Texas when he did play, 1,500 yards, 11 touchdowns. This is a guy who's at least throwing the football and knows kind of what he's doing. He's not going to be a O'Connell, but I think you at least have a guy who's got some stability there. The big thing for Purdue that they've needed the past years is a running game. They have had nothing. They haven't had a running game since DJ Knox in 2018. And I think they might have the guy that can do it in Devin Mockabee. And Mockabee didn't really get playing time until the Minnesota game where he really broke out. Had Mockabee played in that opener against Penn State, I think Purdue holds on because Purdue lost that game because they couldn't run the ball in the last 3-4 minutes of the game. The offensive line is better than it has been, and that's really nice to see because it started off really bad. And it takes time in the Big Ten to build an offensive line. The biggest question on the offensive side is going to be wide receiver. I like TJ Sheffield. I like Bershawn Rice. But asking them to be the next David Bell, asking them to be, asking who we have at tight end to be the next Payne Durham, it's not realistic. So you need a guy who can step up and be the leader. And then you've got a various amount of transfers coming in that you're going to need some production from. On the defensive side, it's the defensive line is my biggest concern. I think it's very thin. I think that you have a lot of transfers coming in. Some of them I think have potential. I'm not sure whether any of them are really, start playmakers. You've got a really good safety in Cam Allen in the backfield. I like the transfer at corner coming in and Marquise Wilson from Penn State. So I think the secondary should actually be okay. But that line really does give me concerns. So if you're asking me where I peg this team, I'd sit them at 6 wins. Maybe they go a little bit lower. I don't think they're going to go much higher just because I think there's too much volatility, but it is the Big Ten West, so you never really know what's going to happen. Purdue has had this absolute refusal to schedule gimme games in the non-conference. I don't know why. They just refuse to do it. And it's the same thing this year. So you open up with Fresno State at home, and then you get a road trip to Virginia Tech, and then you get Syracuse at home. Now, I think they'll beat Fresno State at home because they're retooling on quarterback, but that's not a team you can just sleep on. That's not a gimme game. That's a program that knows what they're doing.
Yep.
Then you go to Virginia Tech, which is a program that has just been on fire lately. But anybody who thinks that you can just walk into Lane Stadium and just not care has never been to Lane Stadium. That is one of the best environments, I think, in college football. So that is going to be a big challenge for a new coach. And then you come in, you get Syracuse coming back. I think they're going to regress a little bit. They beat Purdue last second on this crazy last-minute drive where they had like 3 pass interference calls on 4th down, and then they just lob this ball to the end zone and it gets caught.
Don't forget the unsportsmanlike conduct after Purdue scored a touchdown too, which was
which ended up having them kick from
from midfield. From 15. Sorry. Yeah,
I could go on an entire podcast long rant about how we're policing fun in college football, but I'm not going to do that. But either way, I think Syracuse is going to regress. But that's not a game that you can just say, that we got that in the bag. That's a win.
Yep.
So they could go 3-0 in the non-conference. They could go 2-1. They could go, 0-3. You really just don't know. I think if they can come out of that 2-1, you feel pretty good. And then the really big game for this team is going to be Illinois. It's homecoming. It's at home. You've got this Walters Bielema thing that's cooking on Twitter. The fan bases absolutely hate each other right now because it's just like, you're stealing our recruits. You're stealing our everything. It's super toxic, which I love for a rivalry. Like I would love for this Purdue-Illinois thing to become – most people don't know there's actually a trophy for that rivalry. I would love for this to become a little like I-70 rivalry kind of thing. So it's a very interesting team. I really look forward. The stadium is also being renovated. I'm super excited. They're closing the south end zone in, so it's going to be really cool to see that.
Really?
Yep. It used to be a horseshoe, and they're completely closing it in. And they're building a tunnel for the team to come out, too. It looks really good. So I can't wait to get there for an early season game. And I think for Purdue fans, I would say I think there's going to be highs. I think there's going to be lows this season. You got to trust that you got the right guy. I think they do have the right guy, but it is year one. It's a guy who hasn't shown, head coaching anywhere yet. So you kind of got to let the chips fall where they're going to fall.
Yeah. Well said from a very informed spot. Just some reactions. Hudson Card, I actually had him in his first 2 seasons in Texas with an apex of 97 and a 120. So I'm pretty confident that he'll do well. I think he's probably a good fit for a Harrell offense too. I'm just kind of curious if the running backs are going to have really different roles in a Harrell offense versus what they did under Braum, and there might be a transition. I don't know. I'm not a huge X and O's guy, but they seem a little different. The other thing too is, like I said in the Illinois preview, I want to see what Walters does without Bielema, although I think he'll do good, if only because he surely picked up a lot under Bielema. I think with the with the concerns that you mentioned on the D-line, I might kind of zig, right? When people are zagging, I might see them early as an over team. That first game against Fresno State, Fresno State's breaking a new quarterback, but he had really good numbers at UCF. I want to see what the total is on that one. I might look at that one to go over. And then lastly, just kind of your introduction there, you really kind of informed a remark that you made earlier about Nebraska when you said, I like that they hired Matt Rule because he's not coming off a single great season at a G5 program. And I'm pretty sure you were talking about Daryl Hazel when you said that, right? Are there just some scars there?
Man,
sorry to bring that up.
The thing about Hazel too was it was like immediately when you hire this guy, it's I just don't understand. And completely honest, the previous athletic director, he was a bargain bin shopper. That's what he
There
did.
you go. Yep.
And that hire was a bargain bin hire. One good season at Kent State, which I don't even think was with I don't even think it was with Hazel's players.
No, it was like his second year there. It was just kind of a lightning in a bottle season.
So it made no sense. This guy had absolutely nothing to prove that he could coach, and it was very clear.
Yeah.
Like the first year, you expected them to be bad. You didn't expect them to be almost lose to Indiana State bad.
Mm-hmm.
And by the second or third year of it, you just knew that this guy had no clue. And it's a shame because I did interact with him. He's a great guy. He was really nice. And I think he knew he shouldn't be there. And it's a shame that it had to go that way.
Yeah.
Because he was a really nice guy. But I have plenty of. I don't think I will ever get. And when you're a marching band member, you can't drink and you can't leave early.
Yeah, that could be kind of cruel.
Yeah.
All right. Anything on Purdue, Robert?
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate Hudson Card. I mean, it's going to be hard to basically replace Aiden O'Connell, but Hudson Card's not bad. And again, you have I believe the former Illinois defensive coordinator as the new head coach. So and Illinois was really, really good on defense last year, right? And one of Purdue's problems has been defense. So if you fix that a little bit, you bring in a good quarterback to replace on offense. Again, it's funny that we're talking about Casey Thompson and Hudson Card. They're kind of rejects from the Steve Sarkisian era. And the thing is, if the argument is that Sarkisian can't develop these players, and now they're going off to other places. Like Casey Thompson last year for Nebraska was fine. He was okay. They kept Hudson Card. He was good. He was okay in relief of Quinn Ewers. If these guys have some development, they're actually pretty good. Then it's going to say a lot about Steve Sarkisian too, right? So. Yeah. They do have a hard schedule. I see them maybe. I kind of see them the same way. Maybe about 600, 500, 6-6, something like that. Probably getting to a bowl game. But yeah, I think this team is Hudson Card. It's hard to replace Aiden O'Connell in one season, but I think they can. This is a huge step towards doing that. I think.
Yeah. I do have to give two quick shout-outs. The first one is Aiden O'Connell went to my high school. So I always like to brag that because it's very interesting, his story, because a lot of my friends know his family too. It's a school that's had a decent amount of football success, but he went to Purdue and it was he was a walk-on. Nobody was expecting this guy to do anything. And then in 2019, everybody gets hurt. And I mean everybody. So in one play, you had Rondale Moore and the starting quarterback get hurt against Minnesota. And then the backup quarterback got hurt and got lost for the season. And then you had a third quarterback who ended up being pretty iffy. And so Aiden O'Connell had to come in basically as the fourth string emergency quarterback. And he beats Northwestern. He goes to Evanston, which again, I'm from the Chicago area. My high school's in the north suburbs. So he goes to Evanston. It's basically a homecoming, and he wins that game. And that was kind of his coming out, right? So I think it's a great story for him, but that kind of development is hard to ask for somebody for where he ended up and how Purdue's offense worked. It's hard to ask somebody to replicate that. On the question about the running backs and how Brom used the running backs, I think most Purdue fans will tell you really poorly. Because again, you look at that Penn State game, you run the ball twice and you win the game, and he throws. The problem with Brom was he was very stubborn with the running backs. The second the running game didn't work, he just abandoned it. And you were talking about games where he's not even pretending to try to run the ball. And that's part of the reason why I think it took a while for Maccabee to kind of come out and say, hey, this guy actually has got some pretty good moves. And that Minnesota game, it started feeling like, oh, man, they're going to blow this because they can't run the ball. And then they give this guy the ball, and he just jolts off this 60-yard run to basically seal the game. And it was like, why didn't you do that sooner?
Exactly. Saving it for a big spot, seriously.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, I think Walter's coming from Illinois. obviously he's a defensive background, but coming from Illinois where you had Chase Brown last year, that team knew how to run the ball.
Yeah.
Maccabee is not Chase Brown. I am not going to call him Chase Brown, but I think this is a coach that understands the importance, especially in this division, of being able to run the football. And I think we're going to see at least a little bit more commitment to doing it, and understanding that just because you get shut down on the run one drive doesn't mean you can just stop running. Oh man, if Jeff Brom didn't have to play the last 5 minutes of every game, he would be the greatest quarterback in Purdue, or the greatest coach in Purdue history.
I said this in the ACC pod, and I'm going to say here, you just gave the most sad epitaph for somebody that we can imagine. Then we'll put that on this Hall of Fame pick. All right, so 3 programs we're not going to get into: Rutgers, Northwestern, and Indiana. The only thing I want to say is that the nitwit at DraftKings, whose job it is to copy and paste from other sites, hasn't updated it for Northwestern. So somehow the total on Northwestern is still 3.5. I don't know how, but somebody needs to wake up the ding dong at your eyes lit up just like normal people's would.
I need to get to Indiana.
All right.
Right now, 11 o'clock at night. Let's go.
Final 2 questions. First of all, I'll go first. 3 Heisman bets from this conference. I'm going to lead with Nick Singleton at 50-1. I am very high on Penn State, and those are juicy odds. And if they do what I think they're capable of doing, I think it's going to be, Singleton who gets the glory and not Mr. Aller. Secondly, just second and third, just kind of safe plays here. Marvin Harrison Jr. and Kyle McCord at 20 and 22-1. Isaiah?
Yep. So you hit 2 of mine as well, McCord and Harrison. I really like Harrison. I would be able to say I think that he is one of the best, if not the best, wide receiver in the country. I hit McCord as well, just because that Ohio State offense is so stacked that the potential for a quarterback to have a breakout season is there, and I think that Ohio State's going to rely on him a little bit more than Michigan is going to rely on J.J. McCarthy. So I like those 2. My third one is the long shot play at plus 8,000, and it's Braylon Allen for Wisconsin.
Wow.
Yes. So as I said before, and it's not just my trauma from a Purdue fan, I really like this kid. I look at him and he gives me the Jonathan Taylor vibes. He gives me that, I don't have to ask Madden. I just press the X button on the run play and there he goes, kind of vibes to it. And I think that for Wisconsin, when you're starting out under a new coach, the first thing you need to do is get that identity back. Wisconsin is a run the ball team. That's not to say that they don't have potential to throw this year, but I think if Wisconsin is really going to get back there in year 1, it's going to be on the legs of this kid. So I think he's worth a play.
Interesting. All right, Robert, your 3.
Yeah, I'll go Kyle McCord. Again, I think that's a pretty fair one. I mean, again, it's a quarterback, Ohio State. I mean, again, the C.J. Stroud possibly was actually the favorite to win it for a while until they lost to Michigan, right? So that's, I think, a very fair bet there. I'll go Tanner Mordecai as well. It's even higher. It's like 100-1 in some places. The thing is, again, and this is the issue, right? You have to decide between him and Braylon Allen. The thing is, again, and I've mentioned in other podcasts as well, the Heisman is no longer the most outstanding player. It's the best player on one of the best teams, right? And the question is, what is it going to take for Wisconsin to be considered one of the best teams, right? For that to happen, they'd have to win the Big Ten West. That seems comparatively relatively easy. They just have to win the Big Ten West. They go to Indy. And then if they beat Ohio State or get close to beating them, they'd have 2 times against Ohio State. If they were to beat them, if they could beat them in that, then obviously he's going to win the Heisman. Someone from Wisconsin will win the Heisman. The thing is, I know Luke Fickell is a really good coach. The thing is, I know Wisconsin's identity is running the ball. I feel like he's going to have to shift more towards passing the ball. I think that's where Tanner Mordecai will be able to shine a bit. And I think if he's able to really put the dagger in with some of that passing attack, I think you can really kind of elevate yourself there. And then I don't know, maybe, you know what, I'll go Drew Aller. I think it's fair. that the running back would get more credit there. But I think if somehow Penn State is able to be like, the problem is people are going to be like, oh, Drew Aller led Penn State to the promised land, and they're gonna ignore the running back. There's going to be like stats like, oh, he had 250 passing yards or something, like, and it's like that's not really particularly impressive, but whatever. They're like they'll hype him up as the person who saved the program or whatever. So I feel like he would get the credit there. But again, I've bet Tanner Mordecai, but I'm not touching McCord or the other one. I put a little something on Mordecai, but that's about it. So
Okay. Please don't take this personally, but literally while you were making a case for Drew Aller, I placed a small bet on Nick Singleton. My guy had him at 60. All right, going the other way. So Robert, we'll start with you on this. Who plays for the conference title in Indianapolis?
Wisconsin, Ohio State.
Isaiah?
I've got Michigan and Iowa.
Again?
Oh.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. We have no overlaps here. I'm going Penn State and Minnesota. So, wow. Somebody's going to hit something among us, right? Gotta be.
So we have 3 from each, so.
Yeah. So, okay, cool. Well, that went very well. Isaiah, appreciate your time. Did you give out your Twitter handle, or do you want to, or you want to remain relatively anonymous?
Oh no, you're welcome to you're welcome to give it out. It's at Walker I141. If people actually want to deal with my ramblings on Twitter, which you've been warned now if you actually do choose to partake in that. But thank you for having me on. This is great. I'd love to get to talk Big Ten a little bit. So this is a lot of fun.
No, likewise, it was really good bringing in somebody who clearly knows the layout of the conference, and just everybody definitely follow Isaiah. His is an account that's very, very interesting to follow. So thank you, everybody, and we will see you again soon.